additive manufacturing, safer tools, and shrinking the distance between supply and demand. In this episode of Supply Chain Now Radio, VP of Corporate Strategy with UPS and TED Talk presenter Alan Amling discusses how UPS is leveraging 3D printing to improve supply chain efficiencies and bolster their leadership position in global logistics.
Here on Supply Chain Now Radio, we're really pleased to be featuring Alan Amling. Again, he's VP of Corporate Strategy with a little company named UPS. Good morning again, Alan.
Good morning.
So glad to have you here. UPS has been a great supporter and participant in APIC Atlanta programming going back for as long as I've been a volunteer. Elba Pereira Gallagher, as we all know, is a proud UPSer.
Yes.
I think it's been, how many years? 20, or I think our 20-year anniversary is coming up.
Yeah, I think it's around.
Yeah, Elba's going to choke me if I don't have that right, but we're big fans of UPS.
Well, she's not a rookie anymore.
That's right. So let's talk about what's going on in UPS's world.
So, one of the things that I want to talk about today is something that you might have heard about, but not associated it with supply chain, and that's 3D printing, also known as additive manufacturing. And you might wonder, so why is UPS, this package delivery and logistics company, into on-demand manufacturing? And that's really what we call it. We don't call it additive or 3D printing. We call it on-demand manufacturing. And essentially, just real briefly, 3D printing is laying layer upon layer of material, whether it's a metal or a polymer, and then curing that in some way with heat to create a piece or a part.
And that could be any material, right?
Absolutely. They're coming out. Actually, a lot of the greatest advancements in 3D printing right now are actually on the material side.
Mm-hmm. Because some people picture those little plastic things, and maybe that's where it started. But now it can be cement, it can be steel, right? It can be any material.
Yeah, it's so interesting you say that, because 3D printing has actually been around since the 80s. And so people associate 3D printing with like this brittle plastic that you can break in your hand. They don't associate it with the steel fuel nozzle that is on every GE Leap engine.
Right. That's not the first thing that pops in their head, right?
That's on the Dreamliner, right? And one of the reasons that's driven that is that the patent protection that those companies had that originally invented it in the 80s had gone away, and we're just seeing an explosion in innovation around technologies and materials. And when 3D printing has been primarily used to date for like prototyping and models and things like that, which is interesting, but for us it wasn't compelling. When we saw that the technology and the materials were getting to a point where, hey, this is going to impact industrial production, parts that go into pieces of equipment that people have a warranty on, have a service contract on, have their brand name on, then it's a whole different story, right? Because then there's consistent quality that has to happen. And so at the time when we started our 3D printing, we realized that while we're logistics experts, we're not manufacturing experts. So we had the foresight through our senior executives to invest in a company called Fast Radius, also based here in Atlanta, and they are additive manufacturing specialists. And what we've done essentially is take their manufacturing capability and integrate it within our global logistics facility, or global logistics network. So I'll give you an example. Our first factory we put up in May of 2015 in Louisville, Kentucky, in our supply chain campus, which is just moments away from our All Points hub for the U.S. in Louisville. So we can actually print till midnight. We have a 1 a.m. poll, and we can get the part anywhere in the U.S. by the next morning, right? And so speed and quality go hand in hand. And so one of the ways that we're achieving speed is by integrating it into our logistics network. But
and Alan, I saw where GoPro, which everyone's heard of, the leading camera, action camera product in the world, they see a lot of value in that next day prototype delivery. What you're talking about, that print and ship capability, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you think about how people use GoPros. They've got to stick that GoPro camera on like different, helmets and pieces of equipment. And all of those are custom. So if you had to do that, if you had to create a mold for that, or if you had to create machining for that, it would be extremely, extremely expensive. With 3D printing, we always say there's no cost for complexity because for us, whether it's we're making one of the part or 100 of the parts, the setup cost is the same. But I'll back up a little bit. When we did the original investment in 3D printing, I was heading up marketing for a global logistics and distribution business, and one of the parts of that business is called service parts logistics. And so we have 1,000 field stocking locations all over the world where customers store their critical parts, because if a server or an MRI machine goes down, you not only have to have the technician there, but you have to have the parts there. Well, we know because those parts are stored in our facilities, there's a tremendous amount of those parts that turn very slowly or not at all.
Right.
And there really wasn't a good solution for it, right? Because, if I had an MRI machine and I was moving to the next model, all the tooling and molds for that product are destroyed. So you have a purchasing manager that has to make a decision on how many parts they're going to need to serve that piece of equipment for the next 10 years, 15
years. Right, they got to forecast this, right?
Exactly. And it's a horrible forecast, right?
It's just guesswork.
It's complete guesswork, right? And
the dirty F word.
Right. And the thing is, they're only going to get the call if they run out of parts.
Exactly.
Right.
We need one more. It's like, that's like the worst feeling.
No, exactly. And so they have way too much inventory. And
right, they probably have way too much of certain things and not enough of other things.
That's right. That's right. And so there really wasn't a good solution to, just having too much stock.
Right.
And, we know from our customers that inventory is the devil, right? Everyone wants to reduce inventory. And so we really see this as, and this is why UPS is involved, as a supply chain solution,
right?
As opposed, on-demand manufacturing is a supply chain solution.
Because you can print something from 10 years ago, right? Like
absolutely.
You don't have to store it. Right. You can just make it when you need it, if you ever need it.
Right. Yeah. And we, I've been meeting with folks from heavy equipment manufacturing and aerospace and the military, and these folks are trying to keep equipment going that might already be 30, 40 years old. And the company that supplied the parts isn't in business anymore, doesn't supply it anymore, right? Right. So we think that's a
game changer, right? That changes it. The whole way you just visualize how it works.
Absolutely. And, the reality is we're making the supply chain more efficient. And, and you might say, well, UPS, don't you store and ship stuff? Isn't that how you make
that's like your bread and butter.
Right? Isn't that how you make money? And that's true. But we've been doing this for years. When you talk about making a supply chain more efficient, can we take down the number of warehouses? Can we reduce the number of runs to service for your customer? It's all about efficiency. And we think this is another tool in the toolbox.
Now, is the speed there where you can produce these things in fast enough?
Yeah. So the speed is there for, I would say, for polymers, right? And so the new technology is just incredible. there's a company called Carbon 3D that we're using right now, and I know I can't show viewers on the radio what it looks like, but if you could if you've seen Terminator 2 and the bad guy reforming, it's kind of what it looks like. It essentially pulls the product out of a vat of liquid, and it's about 100 times faster than what had been currently available on the market. So I think polymers are there. Metals are not there yet. So a metal a metal product of, let's say, even like a 5-inch by 5-inch cube, may take over a day to print. So that's not quite there, but there are some really interesting technologies. One is Desktop Metals out of MIT that is using a different process to speed up the manufacturing of metals. And so, one of the points that we want to make is that it's if you look at the universe of products in your business today where 3D printing applies, you can make a really strong business case. The baskets of products relative to your total inventory is rather small. But we see that growing rapidly in the future, and we're encouraging our customers to get in now because there are process changes that you need to make. And if you don't make this now before we hit the hockey stick, you're going to be left behind. And that's why UPS is in it, right? Because we see this change coming. Our choice isn't whether we like the change or not. It's what we're going to do about it, right? And that's why we jumped in.
But I think if you're a supply chain practitioner, a lot of what I've heard at least is options is a great thing. And you want to be able to add or make your supply chain as nimble, as flexible as possible, especially if you're dealing, I like how you put no cost for complexity. It sounds like to me that a lot of the folks that may tap into this new initiative with UPS may be able to enhance and improve their businesses without having to invest in heavy traditional tooling, this, that, and the other, and even better, they're able to experiment quickly because they're getting the prototypes or the parts same day or next day. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. Essentially, one of the things that's really game-changing about additive manufacturing is it's actually shrinking the distance between supply and demand. So, one of the reasons that we oversupply is because we really don't know what the demand is going to be and where it's going to be. And especially as you get to more customized products, the demand is going to occur before the supply, right? So there's going to be no inventory, and you can already, that's already beginning to happen. So Adidas just announced a 3D printed shoe that, not only is going to be made for the exact fit of your foot, but they'll be taking 3D scans of your foot and you'll run on a mat and they'll see how your weight is distributed. And they'll be creating soles that are specifically for your foot. And I mean, 10, 15 years from now, people are going to look back and say, you bought shoes off the shelf?
Now, does Adidas also believe no cost for complexity? So are these Adidas shoes going to be pretty inexpensive?
Yeah, so they're talking about these shoes being in the $150 price range. So, that's if you've been to an athletic store. I mean, that's kind of
how much that costs.
That's kind of in the ballpark, right?
Maybe Nike will apply it to the Air Jordans. We'll see.
Hey, all the companies are looking at customization, and we're seeing even from tool manufacturers. And you might think, tool manufacturers, what? Why do you need to customize a hammer? And it's actually the grip. And what we've been told is that one of the greatest causes of accidents on a job site are tools slipping out of the worker's hands. So, we're seeing opportunity now that wasn't even imagined when we started this journey.
So, and I think it's important to note that creative entrepreneurial ventures are nothing new for UPS. As I was reading, Sci-Fi Works, a drone manufacturing initiative, Deliv, same-day delivery. it seems like you are pretty smart about investing in the right disruptive technologies.
Yeah, we're trying to learn, right? And you can't, a lot of these technologies, you can't learn by reading about it. You got to learn by doing. You've got to get your hands dirty. You've got to get into it because, I'll tell you, just with 3D printing, which was another one of these investments that we made in Fast Radius, it allowed us to get out there in front of customers and with a minimum viable product and understand what their questions were and understand what their challenges are to actually adopt this. And it's the first to understand what the question is that typically wins, because companies have the resources to find the answer. They just need to understand the right questions.
What's the problem?
Right?
What's the problem?
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And you don't get that by sitting at your desk.
And that's a great point. And UPS does a great job of identifying those startups to partner with and really creating that ecosystem where, those scrappy startups that are doing interesting things can get on your radar. And not only do you support them, but you might make an investment in them. And so you can do the learning in real life, not in some hypothetical, theoretical world where a lot of companies get bogged down with, hey, we'll just put the smart people in a room somewhere and they'll figure it out, where you're learning from the actual real life examples of people using the stuff.
Yeah, that's right.
Speaking of application, we mentioned Sci-Fi Works, the drone initiative that UPS is involved in. I read earlier that there was a neat disaster relief drone pilot program that UPS, Sci-Fi, and the American Red Cross rolled out in September. What a neat, we talk about a real-world application about what's the problem. And we were talking earlier about the infrastructure challenges that Puerto Rico has in addressing and successfully carrying out relief operations. If you don't have roads, your options are very limited. So,
right, and you're an island, and
absolutely,
so there are challenges right there.
Surrounded by big water.
Any early returns, any early results on that drone pilot program?
I have, I haven't seen the results from that pilot from the most recent disaster relief initiative yet, but suffice to say, we do see great application for drones. We don't necessarily see, millions of drones descending on downtown Atlanta to
one box at a time.
Right. But never say never. But that's not what we're looking at right now. It's really disaster relief. It's humanitarian aid. So we have another pilot in Rwanda where we're using drones to deliver critical blood supplies.
Right, medical supplies. Right?
Yeah. And it's the same issue there, right? It's the transportation. There's the infrastructure's not there. The other place we're using it is in super rural areas, right? Where you wouldn't think of it in Atlanta, but when you're in some places in North and South Dakota, you're traveling 30 miles or more between stops, and so that's where we see a great opportunity to put a package on a drone, send it to one stop, and we go to our service provider goes to another, and then the drone and the package car meet up and they do it again, and they just become more efficient.
So they're working in concert with the vehicle.
Correct. Yeah. The pilot we have, actually the drone is mounted on the top of the package car.
But you mentioned the F word earlier, forecasting, and I like your spin on how 3D printing could, in many cases, make that to be less the traditional challenge that many supply chain folks deal with. I should shameless pitch here. So to our audience, if you do want to get better at forecasting, APIX has 3 mainline certifications. Chris Barnes would shoot me if I didn't bring this up. CPIM, CLTD, CSCP, in particular the CPIM and the CSCP, spend a good deal of time wrapping best practices around the forecasting challenge. So to our audience, check that out. Speaking of Elba Pereja-Gallagher, earlier a proud UPSer, she has her CSCP certification. I'm sure if she were here, she'd say the same thing. So, but really pleased to it's neat to not only be part of an APIX organization that benefited from UPS involvement like today and all of our programming, but to be part of, a supply chain market where one of the headquarters, one of the teams that has such a big investment in Atlanta is out there doing big things. Is on the leading edge of many of the technology applications and deployments, and not just playing it safe. Right. That's the neat thing.
Right. It speaks to the culture of UPS.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. So before we transition to Elizabeth, we got some neat stuff lined up with her in the High Performance Minute. Any last minute, any challenges to supply chain community or the APIX community?
Well, so, for us, the biggest challenge, along with the 3D printing is just awareness, right? Mm. It's just awareness. And so we need people to understand that this new technology is out there, that there are people that can help, that it's not, you can get into it without investing in a bunch of assets. And my biggest thing is just get in the game, right? Start to learn, get in the game. And you've got people like UPS and Fast Radius that are here to help you.
Great. And learn by doing, not just by watching and reading on the sidelines.
That's right. That's right.
Well, Alan, it's been a pleasure to have you here today. Again, appreciate your support, and we look forward to more news on these exciting initiatives.
Fantastic.